Hello everyone, this is Risk Working Group meeting and I've started recording. Please write your name in the
Oh,
attached sheet and tell me how you're feeling or anything on your table which we don't see or anything you feel like telling. I'm a little nervous because I'm facilitating and so
I have tiny arcade machines. I have the real life version of this one too, by the way. Full
CHAOSS?
it says Joust. Yeah, I have the full-fledged one in my office.
the 8-bit arcade game?
Yeah. I restore them. I have Centipede downstairs and I have Gorf downstairs. So
Awesome.
in all their original glory. It is not a Mamo board on the inside. So
Ah, well, I'm still probably not any good at them, so
that doesn't matter. Totally doesn't matter.
I wrote video games many years ago, and had to have my brother play them because I couldn't play them.
okay. So we have first thing in our agenda is tagging updates. Any feedback or any idea? I think Sean and Kat were working on
Yeah, this
that.
is mostly
So,
Sean and Kate. So
yes,
I think this is just in terms of the issue tagging, right?
yes. It's tagging through codes, like analyzing GitHub code through tagging.
Mm-hmm. So I don't have an update on that.
Yeah. So I think it's we can skip that for the moment. And then second item on the agenda is build versus runtime dependencies review metric sheet. I looked at the metric sheet. I don't see any metric for this, but what I recall, it's in the evolution discussion also, which I mentioned earlier. Maybe we can start discussion or have create a metric around this.
So my discussion on this is dependencies and like understanding ecosystem level health has come up repeatedly in the last like 2 months. And apparently it's hard to do. And it has shown up in the evolution working group, the value working group, and the risk working group. And I think having this kind of, oh, Kate's here, good. Having this kind of split discussion across 3 working groups is a bad idea for the time being. So I think we have to find a home for where we talk about dependencies. And I don't particularly care where it is, but just so we don't have 3 different groups talking about the same thing and then one person has to spend time in each of the working groups kind of assembling all of the conversation. So
To that, like this discussion has already been discussed, like where should we locate these dependencies? Now I see evolution is already started working and risk. This is coming again and again, and even from the value, the discussion is still going on. So should everybody do it on their own and then we combine it collectively, or what should be the goal?
I kind of liked what we had laid out of all of the different types of dependency categories, because I think for me it could make logical sense that if we have more of a holistic set of dependency categories, then no single group will own all of them. There might be natural fits within a series of them. I mean, this is saying this before I actually look at how things are broken out, and maybe it's not going to be as clean, but just in terms of feasible tackling, I think it would make sense to kind of split it up then. And even if it's not a perfect alignment to individual working groups, I think because it's such a big topic, it should lend itself well to different pockets talking about it, because they might come up with different things organically. So by forcing one individual group to do it, I think I don't know, it's a hard thing to cover. And we might get more ideas if we have separate conversations first, and then not require one group to take it on entirely.
Point well taken.
Unless you're going everywhere, Matt, and then you're basically taking it on.
Yeah, and then there's one person that basically has to hop from working group to working group to make sure that any like alignment is being done. So it's mostly like your suggestion has huge benefits in that the conversation can occur in 3 different places, and a lot of the different people who attend the different working groups can bring their insight. So for example, oh, I'm sorry, Kate.
No, I was just agreeing with you. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I was just saying they can each bring their perspectives.
Because like Dwayne O'Brien has been participating in the value working group from Indeed. And so he has a lot of interest in dependencies. And Sophia, he had actually sent me the exact same video that you sent me. and here you are in the risk working group, obviously with some awareness and interest in dependencies. And as Vinod had pointed out, it's in the evolution working group too. So,
but it's like one more thing I was thinking, is it like putting a double effort from each one instead of having like one more organized?
Yeah.
So it's like everyone is working on the dependency and putting every effort instead of like one working and looking on all the avenues.
Why don't we just try to basically have everyone, focusing on dependencies in their groups, and then just basically call a dependencies meeting and have everyone from all the groups who are interested in dependencies show up sometime.
Yeah.
Just sort of like, we do this sort of thing organically in an in-person conference. So why don't we just see if we can use the remote to, call effectively a bit of a workshop on, let's pull it all together once, people have matured their thoughts initially.
Okay, so then that could kind of accomplish what Sophia was talking about, was let every working group kind of talk about it and explore the issue, and then have a call for a session at some point where we have, that would help me. Right, my concern was selfish, right? that was it.
I should quickly note also that the Open Source Security Foundation also has an interest in this. So
as does
Open Source Security Foundation, yeah.
Yeah, as does the anti-IS bomb efforts, right?
Oh, that's right.
So can we have any kind of collaboration with them or a joint working on evolving this thing if they are interested? Or can we reach them out or have some kind of a liaising with them?
So I think what Kate suggested, the easiest thing to do would be to have that discussion in the community call now, thinking about how we could organize a bunch of different groups together. And the working groups could, for the time being, almost pretend that other dependency work wasn't occurring in other working groups and just
see what insights could bubble up.
Yeah, exactly. So I can take that.
You've got automation sitting there. Is this a new work group that I've missed?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay, I was just wondering if there's a work group focusing on automation.
I read the wrong thing. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So all right. So automation is not a working group. I read that sentence.
Sorry.
2A up here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly where. Evolution. Okay, thank you.
Where my brain is today.
I was gonna be like...
Okay. My brain's there too, I'm afraid. Oh dear, oh dear.
All right. Well, hi, Kate. So, Kate, we did skip over tagging. Sean can't join us today.
I got swamped into having to do fires.
No problem. Just
and
making sure.
I'd rather talk this through with Sean here too as well. But
okay.
I'll be honest, no, there wasn't enough time I spent to be worth talking about anything today.
No problem.
Okay. Okay, and then we have if anything else on the tagging or dependency, or can we move to the other agenda?
Yeah, I guess one last thing. If you scroll down to the second page, there is this link right here, this YouTube link.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a really nice presentation from work at Google as to how they're thinking about dependencies.
Okay.
With like 20-minute talk by Julia.
All right. I will add that to my personal queue of things to do.
Yeah. Did others get a chance to look at that the report that came out too?
The kernel report, or
no, State of Open Source one that came out recently.
I didn't.
Okay, just a second. I'll go dig up the link and then put it in here too.
Okay.
You know who that was published by? Just want to know how to look for it.
It was one of the source code analysis folks. Suntech, maybe? No. Sorry.
Okay.
I've downloaded it. Let me just go to that from there. See comments from David about.
Is it a Red Hat? I can see a Red Hat State of Open Source, a Red Hat report.
I saw that one a few months ago. I didn't know if there was something else.
It was pretty recent. It was a source code analysis folk. State of software supply chain.
I posted a link on the chat. Is this the one?
No.
Sorry, I'm trying to do 3 things at once. What are you looking for, Kate?
I've just a second. I've got it. Just a second. It came out on August 11th. It was a state of software supply chain.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's been several of those kinds of reports over the years.
Yeah, well, this is this year's, and it had a lot of good data in it, I thought.
Is that sort of the follow-up on the one that came out of the Linux Foundation last year?
Just a second here.
Oh, I see one.
Yeah, just a second. That's it. There we go. Let me paste the link in now. So, second here. While I'm waiting for links to emerge and things, let me try screen sharing to show, okay? I do have it up now. Oops. Host is a disabled attendee screen sharing. I guess I can't share that.
No, you can. Wait, give me a second.
I have already made her co-host. Now you can share.
Okay, there we go. So this one came out recently, that I came across a link to this one recently. And so Sonatype with the Muse Dev folk.
Super small brainstorming. Is this what we're doing right now, or is this notes from something else?
It's something to occur.
Okay, because I would also add age of dependencies as well.
Well, there, see, you're already brainstorming ahead of things.
Basically, so it sounds like we're going in that direction, but anyhow.
What is
age of dependencies and known vulnerabilities and dependencies.
Like the dependency chain too. Is the other one I want to add on that list. How down do your dependencies go, and how hidden are they?
What do you mean, like indirect versus direct?
Mm-hmm.
I guess indirect, then it could be the sort of a chain of indirect dependencies.
So basically, variable most influencing performance and risk management is part of the elements I wanted to highlight for this group. And some of the trust aspects as well.
Okay.
And so, there's a pretty little bunch of sound bites and things like that, but the supply chain, anyhow, I just thought this would be useful for coming for things that should be considered as metrics in this area.
Can you put it in a link to in the notes, and we can?
That's what I was trying to get. That's what I was trying to do, except my computer is being very slow, so I just decided to screen share instead. But supply and demand, no. Situation almost keeps growing, which are useful slides for me to do, which is to convince people that they have to pay attention to open source, the details.
Yeah, copy that Red Hat thing into the notes.
as well. Yep. But here, 173 times less likely.
Is it
to
state of
have-
software supply chain? I'm sorry.
Yeah, state of software
Okay.
supply chain. Like I say, my computer I think needs to be rebooted. It's being rather sluggish. But
I think that's
you know,
it.
dependencies out of date. To the comments, less likely if they're if they're following various metric, what they consider the best practices here. It might be interesting to understand what they're considering as their practices for the exemplary OSS projects compared to the CI best practices badge 2. And so,
By the way, I've added this this presentation to the notes. It may have been in the right place, but at least there's a URL.
good man. Okay.
Alrighty.
So the survey of the open source software, yeah. So like I say, you can sort of, this is the one that was sort of like security first, low performance, high performance, productivity. And so you look at their sample sizes and so forth. And so that seemed like it was worth probably sort of trying to talk about a bit at some point and trying to understand that a little bit more.
Yeah, just fair warning, the chat, as far as I know, disappears as soon as this ends, which makes it fairly useless for referring to it later.
It does.
Yeah. But
I've grumbled about this before.
cut paste, it's a shared effort.
Absolutely. I'm already on it.
Yeah. Okay, so high performers outperform low performance in software delivery and security. So looking at the definition of what they consider, but like I say, there's various metrics that are kicking in here in terms of dependencies break between application functionality, describing, updating dependencies, confidence that
Gotcha.
this type of thing. So that's why I thought this group would find this one interesting, and I made a note to bring it up today.
Okay, thanks.
And yeah, meantime to detect vulnerabilities, meantime to remediate. And that's, I think, what a lot of people are starting to look at, which is, detect, remediate. And then we have license compliance. Sorry. Come on, I have to be true to my roots.
Licenses, what are those?
The risk factors. Anyhow, it's a slightly different way of looking at it, which is in compliance with their organization's policy, but nonetheless, it's considered as a risk factor. And then we sort of go into productivity ideas and satisfactions. So,
that's fancy.
Isn't it though? It looks like the dot diagram with density on it.
Looks like outer space.
I know, doesn't it though?
I'm gonna have to study that chart.
What?
I'm gonna have to study that one. That is one heck of a bizarre chart there.
And this thing like this migration time, I want to try to study and understand this one. Actually, it's one that I'm trying to figure out myself. So there's spring down here too. But let me just stop sharing. So
help me understand, Kate. Which document were you sharing there? I got a little lost.
That was the Sonotype one, State of the Open Source.
2020 SSC one.
Yep.
Okay, got it. All right, so that link is there. All right, I have homework apparently.
No, I mailed it. I actually mailed you. I mailed that one to the Harvard and you guys last night, actually, I think too.
Oh, okay. I haven't done all my homework from last night.
No worries.
I think there are some emails I haven't gotten to yet, actually. So
oh, fine. I'm just teasing you a little bit, but yeah.
I'm used to it. Okay.
Okay.
Well, so in that super small brainstorming thing, in an effort to kind of address what Sophia was talking about, that each one of the working groups may think about dependencies slightly differently. I had put, there are a couple in here, right? So the number of dependencies, you can all see it right here without me rereading it. The other one was that came up from the video, the YouTube video that I showed, was CPU usage. I don't know, Sophia, do you have insight on that at all?
As a dependency?
No. The
No.
dependency causes too much CPU usage.
Yeah, like how much,
Oh.
what portion are you able to actually influence? So I was thinking.
It was more of a comparative measure, at least how we were using it internally. So,
Okay.
like, if you know that you have a dependency on this piece of software, how much is it actually being used? And so, one way to quantify it was how many cycles is it running. And so that's I think where it came from, because of knowing how our dependency server thinks, that's what's happening. But just as a way so that it's not just we know we have a dependency, but it's how many times is the dependency being called, and that's one way to measure it.
Yeah, although I think that's mostly misleading, except if you never call it. If you never call it, that is an interesting dependency point. But if you only call it once and the software won't work without it, it doesn't matter if it only calls it once.
It's more of also a way to identify highly popular pain points. If you know it's being called a lot, even and then you can see how many things are calling it. Then it sort of shows you where your weak points are.
So maybe instead of like, especially like at granular level, focusing just on CPU, maybe we could resource dependencies, like how much resources that dependencies have primary in terms of CPU.
Your video was really weird, and then it got all your words came out really fast.
Yeah, but I'm thinking of, yeah, I'm thinking of like when you do training for machine language for machine learning, you're going to go a whole lot of matrix multiply calls. But there's other things that if they don't work, it doesn't matter about the matrix multiply calls.
So go ahead.
Do we want to flesh out a little bit more about the chain of dependencies and how deep that dependency chain is? Because it's hidden dependencies that are biting people right now on the risk side, from what I can tell. And so it's the ones that are dynamically linked in some ways. And then, you know, how far down do you need to go to actually articulate all the dependencies that you need in order for your application to run? So it's not the total number, it's the depth number.
Yep.
And, you know, to what extent are they sort of like, the things I'm thinking about are like the glibc types of things, where you sort of take those interfaces for granted.
All right, so I'm going to call that a completely different measure, depth of dependencies.
Okay.
Because I agree with you. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the CII work recently on this. They're trying to identify through dependencies and stuff. And the ones that came up, at least in the JavaScript area, for the most part, are projects that most people have never heard of. I mean, people have heard of Lodash, but most of the rest of it, you know, they show up because there's a transitive dependency that keeps ending up there, not because anyone realizes that.
So for the people on this call, are there any on this super small brainstorming list that appear to be something that we could start taking on in the risk group? I get so confused when I think about dependencies and ecosystem stuff sometimes. Like my mind just kind of melts. Because it's so big. It gets so big so quickly. Like even listening to you talk, Kate, like when you're talking about like the scope, and the scope can just be enormous.
Well,
so
and that's why we have the supply chain risks, right? And you know, the open source ecosystem has got all these really interesting fragile places. I still love that XKCD comment. That comment that came in there, that, you know, that should be our, you know, in fact, the dependency was out of Nebraska, if I'm remembering.
It was.
Yes. Absolutely.
Most definitely was. It's amazing.
So it's sort of like, you know, it's pretty good that way.
I like that. Yeah. So is there anything on this list that is a particular pain point, Kate or Sophia or David, mean, you're all out in the industry more than I am.
Well,
Is
I
there-
think the real pain point is what is an intersection of what's important combined with what isn't getting a lot of support. So that XKCD cartoon is a great example of it's not just that it's widely used and the person who's supporting it is, it's, they have many other things to do in their life and nobody realizes there's a problem.
Yeah, like zlib was a problem in this way,
Right.
in terms of getting updates happening to it. Because the person who was the maintainer didn't really have a good test infrastructure and was very reluctant to take in changes that might break things. And so there's all these interesting forks that are emerging where people are doing what they needed to do. But a lot of people were using and depending on zlib. So, and
so
they secret things.
is there I'm asking this question and I think I know the answer, but is there a standard way to determine what's important?
No, but there is a CII census too, where people are actively working to solve this problem.
Okay.
So and I put the name down, but I haven't actually given a link. Let me fix that problem.
And there was a report that came out with this stuff. So.
Yeah, February. Oops. Oh,
Is the
it's going to be
question
there 12 multiple times here. Okay, there we go.
and is that question not even a good question? So like when I watch that video,
Well, I haven't seen the video yet, so I'm not sure how much I should speak. But if you're installing a container in order to do a task, what you're bringing in with it is ambiguous sometimes. And those are all effectively dependencies in order for your task to execute because they've all been put in there. Some of those are sitting in the container and they don't need to be. So you've got stuff in there that, you're not going to, it can't have a vulnerability. If it has a vulnerability or not, doesn't much matter, but nonetheless it's there. And then there's some things in there that then have a dependency on the infrastructure for running the clouds you don't have access to. So that's what I mean by direct dependencies and indirect dependencies.
okay.
Yeah. And in principle, this isn't hard. It's just a directed graph. And the challenge is as you get further and further away from where you start, it's a whole lot less. You're typically not aware of it.
We've got Steve's work. We've got dependency tracker. Why don't we just go look at that right now?
I feel like it might also be helpful to couch the conversation in more specific types, because I feel like I used to cover infrastructure as an analyst before. When you think of dependency, your first is proprietary infrastructure dependencies, where you have to use their tool and you have to use their software, and if you want to change anything, you have to replace everything. So if you start factoring in a different type of software development architecture and tooling that has less dependencies on proprietary infrastructure and tooling, then that is a category of dependency. So at a certain point, you're now mixing in architectural principles with the level of dependencies that you're incurring. What tools are we selecting, knowing that they're more or less dependent on these things? Because of the microservices architecture, there are ways to reduce individual dependencies because things are running modularly. So maybe your software execution dependency only fails for one of your 5 things. And so that's not a complete failure. So you essentially can engineer different elements of risk and dependency depending on all these things, which I just feel like makes the conversation a little bit too complex for coming up with simple metrics unless we say in this context, I think then we can have very defined risk. So like the Omaha example, I think that's very much like the people risk. What happens if that guy goes away? Then this thing will eventually fail and there's no one who knows what's happening or who knows how to jump in there and fix it. So I see that as sort of like a people dependency. And then I think to David's point, that's sort of, if you're looking at it from a supply chain perspective, then that's a big area of risk, which was highlighted, I guess, in the software supply chain security report that I read last year. Coming up,
the OpenSSL was one that first sort of brought the mindset of everyone. But what you're talking about is what's the equivalent of the bus factor for inside?
It is the bus factor. So there's that part, but I don't know. So I guess it's really that what kind of dependency are we talking about? And then we can have a metric within that context.
So I just pasted the link to dependency track, the open source project.
The OWASP dependency
Yeah,
track?
the OWASP stuff. So I think, where's, I go to the Git, there's the GitHub, okay, good.
Is this open source?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's here. They actually
Well,
are ingest SPDX documents, by the way, as well as CycloneDX.
Yes, this is an OWASP project.
Yeah.
I have never seen this.
Oh, it's cool. It's cool stuff.
Okay, so this is super helpful already because it sounds like, I mean, one of the first steps is even just getting a visual.
Yeah, they've got some dashboards already created for this, so that seems to be a good starting point.
How have I never seen this? I feel bad.
Well, and also the Linux Foundation itself has been working with another vendor to get dependency information out. And of course, GitHub also does automated analysis if you ask for it on dependencies. All of these have their pros and cons, but yeah.
But this is super helpful because then, I mean, once we can rely on, at least from the CHAOSS perspective to me, once we can rely on other folks to start providing insight as to what those dependencies are, even as described by in the video or like what Sophia had described, we can then start talking about the metrics that you should probably be using to look at this revealed data. So now we have the landscape in front of us. What are the things that we care about? So for example, I know David, you had put like known vulnerabilities in those dependencies. So we can get a landscape view of what the dependencies are. And it's almost like a neutral look, I'm guessing, is what this dependency tracker thing is. But this will allow us to then do a deeper dive as to which metrics or what questions we should be asking against this data. Well, okay, so now I'm going to take this to all the other working groups. You see?
Not colonization efforts.
Now I've got to go over there and bring all of this stuff.
Colonizing across these little groups as we go along.
What I wanted to avoid, but it's not avoidable.
No, instead of avoiding it, we're steered it on top of you.
I don't know about you, Matt, but I love talking about dependencies. So I don't know. I think it sounds fun to take this on the road.
All right, well, off we go.
Yep. Now, I will say that I think you're gonna need to coordinate this with some other folks because other folks also have an interest in this. The OpenSSF has an interest in this. SPDX has an interest in this. I think both Kate and I know a little bit about.
Well, we have a bunch of relationships so that you can actually track it. And then the NTIA stuff right now, one of the things I have to work on for them is writing up some examples and sort of starting to articulate what is known versus what is is your dependency set complete or not? Or is there ambiguity in your dependency set? And so this is something that has been identified that they want to be able to track for various devices. Like, can you say that you have listed all the first level dependencies, all the second level dependencies, for all the dependencies of a package, can you be explicit you have listed them all? Or do you know that there's something you don't know? And so this concept of is everything known or is it unknown is an element that has to be we have to work our way through the tooling with. And up till now, what happens is people sort of put what they know, but they don't try to figure out what they don't know and what they're assuming. And when they're writing these dependency trees, these directed graphs. And a lot of the things that you sort of show your component packages, but you may not be showing all the libraries you're expecting running on the OS underneath you. And so that's where it's getting interesting to me.
Super interesting. Can somebody in the GitHub repo Can you click on that for the dependency track?
Yeah, I'm in there. What? Sure, you want
You
me
know
to share?
that? Yeah.
Where do you want me to navigate to? Like this one, maybe?
No,
Okay.
up. Yeah, go up a little bit.
Uh-huh.
That figure.
Okay.
What? Can you? I know you didn't make it, but can you explain it to me?
Sure. So, um,
I noticed that the S bombs only include cyclone DX and SPDX. ISOs is nowhere to be seen.
I mean, Swede is nowhere. Actually, well, if you look at the top of the repo, it looks like he's starting to add them.
Yeah, SWID's not there, and OMG's work isn't there either.
Well, OMGs is basically just models. No one's actually implemented the format or done the serialization of it yet. It'll be close to SPX3 if we keep working it. But anyhow, so you have a bill of materials that someone's giving you for a product, and then you can start walking through it with the dependency track, and then looking at what you can find from the components that are listed there through like the sonotypes, the MVD, and so forth. And then probably working for the sub-level dependencies beyond through these other support repositories is how I would interpret that.
Okay.
But, and then, this is just how you're communicating out that you found issues.
I gotcha. Okay.
So I'm particularly interested, for example, in security because I mean nowadays most of the code isn't the code you wrote; it's the code you brought in.
Yeah.
So so this whole dependency issue has become a major issue in security, and rightly so. And so that top left that talks about bill of material, how do I know what's in there? And then various databases that say for this component, what are the known vulnerabilities? And you hopefully look up for this component, what are the known vulnerabilities? Are the versions that I have? Now, there's a next step, which is of the known vulnerabilities, which ones apply to my system? And that's a much harder analysis. But if you don't even know what exists, you certainly can't do that next step analysis.
And
okay.
What's absolutely staggering is how much the commercial world does not acknowledge that they have open source underneath them, and they don't even try to track down the lower levels. And when you start talking to people, at the end customer point, and you realize just how unsophisticated a lot of them are. The crawl, walk, run aspect has to be taken into account. And there's a lot of the ecosystem that's completely isn't even crawling yet in the whole department.
Not even necessarily crawling.
That's it. Yeah, it's not even crawling yet, right? It's sitting in their mummy's arms and going their hands, going, what's going on?
I would say last year Gartner estimated that 95% of organizations use open source, but a lot of them didn't know they were using it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what that shows is that they didn't understand the other 5%. Because what I'm telling people is there's only two kinds of organizations: the one that know they are, and the ones that don't know they are. Those are your only options. There are no projects anymore. There are no companies anymore of any real size that don't use open source. If you're using Windows and Mac, you're using open source, huh?
You don't use any technology at all.
Yeah, that's going to be a challenge. If you got a phone.
Okay.
So is in this figure is the only way to originate the dependency track through a bill of materials? Do you know?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
You can use dependency.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
No,
Kate.
please go ahead. You
No, I'm going to probably miss a little bit here because there's two related OWASP projects, and I sometimes mix them up. But OWASP does include tools to analyze software directly.
Okay.
And now, if you go down a little bit further in this little picture, and then go back down a little bit. No, do the pretty picture that we were just looking at. Yeah, that one. Supported repositories. I mean, it actually takes relatively little effort to write a code that looks for, say, a gem file, or
Yep.
basically the various files for the various programming languages that tell you here are the libraries. At the least, you should be able to load that in and be able to see right away, well, what am I depending on?
Okay.
And at the very least, OWASP, I forgot if it's dependency track or their other tool, but one of those tools integrates together with dependency track to it's either this tool or a tool that integrates into this that lets you do that.
Okay.
One of the problems with that is and the thing that I try to get people never to do is, why don't we copy that open source project into our directory here, and then we'll start making edits. Because then, as soon as you do that, it's typically no longer tracked. It's and now and over time it becomes increasingly difficult to figure out, is that the original project? Is this so modified I can't tell? And there are companies like Sonatype that will be delighted to tell you very, very expensive tools that require incredible amounts of memory to try to figure this out.
Yes.
That's helpful. That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. So Sonatype, I think they want you to have 256 gigs to start of RAM to do their analysis. Because if you make the analysis hard, it's hard. And basically, if you make your life painful, and then it comes back to this thing of being unaware. These companies and organizations that make themselves unaware and don't track things quickly get in situations that are really, really awful.
Yeah, and as you can see, they've got a lot of little badges here.
So we're actually approaching near the end of this meeting. We've talked about dependencies the whole time.
I had a quick question for you. On point 4, David's security threats dashboard projects. Was that me, David? Or was that some other David?
It's Sean has posted this, so I have no idea. I think it's pointed to you, I guess.
Okay, how's this? Okay, I don't own some of these projects, so I'm just going to delete my name and say security threats dashboard projects. So if you don't mind, before we end, I'd like to just quickly note there is another group, Open Source Security Foundation, OpenSSF. There's a working group called Security Threats, which is kind of misleading. It doesn't tell you what the working group is about. They're interested in developing a dashboard to create metrics and measure them for security-related metrics for projects. That seems to be highly related to this risks group.
Okay.
I just made them aware of you. I'm making you aware of them.
Thank you.
Okay. And I'm hoping that there will be kumbaya and, increasing work over time together and such. But the first step is at least being aware of each other.
What is the name of that group? I can add to the list because we have added 3 over there: SPDEX, OpenSSF, and TIA.
Yeah, so they want to measure things. Now, they have a very specific goal. They want to create a little dashboard where you basically enter a URL and poof, you get metrics on it. So
Okay.
they're not, if it's something that's hard and requires specialized work, and we can do it for 50 projects, that's not what they want. They want to be able to do it for a very, very large number of projects. It's totally automated, in a totally automated way if they can. So that's a different, that may be different than what some of you are interested in, but that's dead. That said,
where is their work occurring? Is it mostly in the GitHub repo that you have there?
That's at least the good place to start. They just formed officially. I mean, I guess this group some of these folks were part of a previous group within GitHub, but my understanding is that they've done some work. They're kind of still in process. I'm trying to find out what they've done so far. So at this point, they're still kind of forming.
Okay, I might just post an issue to say hello.
That would be fair.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
We are at the end of the time, and all the discussion around only dependencies, but very helpful.
Yeah,
I agree. All right.
Yeah. So then
I'll bring all this work to the other working groups. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Good to see you.
See ya.